Hey, I'm Nate.
Hey guys, it's Brian.
And I'm Barry.
Welcome back to Collecti-Bros podcast. Today's topic, consoles that we love to collect for. So for today's episode, we each pick 2 consoles that we collect for. There is some crossover because some of us enjoy the same things, but we're going to get unique perspectives for each one. But before we dive into that, what are you playing right now, Barry?
I'm still playing Trails in the Sky, and I have nothing else to say about it because I didn't get very far.
Enjoying it?
I am.
Brian?
I'm back on the Terra Life.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
So they announced recently, after 10 years, they're closing the North American servers for Terra. They haven't specified whether it's going to be console versions yet, but I can read their writing on the wall, so we're back on the Terra grind. Still playing Disintegration. I haven't been playing it as much as I would like. Yeah, and also I've been playing Chrono Trigger Mobile, which is a horrible port, but you know what? When there's $300 carts around at local game stores and they're beat to crap, this is doing the job.
I'm also on the Terra Life. We recently completed the Japan server version of it. It's a different stack of achievements, so at least we know what we're doing and kind of get through it. Not my cup of tea, but we're getting through it. Thankfully, my character is OP, so it kind of just run through these dungeons pretty quickly. Also playing the show, which is probably a shocker to nobody at this point. It'll go up every week.
Wait, did you cross your Asian server characters over?
Oh, unfortunately, you can't.
Oh, I wish.
How's your character OP if you just started it?
This build, I'm using the same build as I did last time.
Oh.
It's you can just cheese with it, and once you get to like level 30, you can pretty much 1 or 2 hit everything that's not a gigantic level boss. So Brian will come up and like hit it once, and then I will just blast it to oblivion and rinse and repeat for 40 hours.
Okay, that makes sense.
Barry, you have any pickups lately?
Not games, but I got the Square Enix released a Final Fantasy Heroes and Villains vinyl set that I finally got that after pre-ordering for a while. So it's a 4-disc set, and the entire thing is, I think there's about 2 songs per mainline game, and it's like 2 of the hero style songs and then 2 of the villain style songs. So not games, but it is pretty cool. I listened to the whole thing yesterday. It's all the original ones. It's not like if Final Fantasy VII is not the remake versions, it's the OGs.
It's a beautiful set. Like I was looking at it, I was like,
The art's rad on the covers.
It is nice. It's all the art from the Dissidia games.
So cool.
Which I think is synonymous with Amano at this point. Like, I think it's the same artist who did everything for Kingdom Hearts, and that's kind of like Square's go-to. And I really enjoy the art on those. They have Dissidia trading arts figures that are in the position of how they are in those photos. Like, I have the Squall one up there, and it's really cool. And I'm like, I need all of these. Oh, no. So that's all I got.
Brian, how about you?
Nothing crazy. Some original Xbox filler, as always. You know, rinse and repeat, trying to get the complete library for that. So if I see something they don't have for cheap, I just pick it up. Nothing of note. A lot of action figures. Still have been on a really big action figure kick recently. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Mine's kind of unfortunate. We had these lovely PUBG decanters that were a Christmas gift that had rum in it. I've had it by my TV for a couple of years now, no issues. Take a little shot when we won. It's been a while since we played PUBG, but it reminds me of the good old days. Had a stack in my current gen games that I'm currently playing that are pre-installed, and yeah, it exploded one day randomly, and I had 5 Series X games and 1 PS5 game covered in rum, so I'm in the process of buying those again to replace the cases, and that's great. That's what every collector loves to do, is go back and buy games they've already got.
Yep.
Because they screwed something up.
I think we're down to, out of the squad, only 2 remaining decanters because mine miraculously exploded as well.
Yeah. Literally the minute Brian sent that picture and was like, my decanter exploded.
Like, don't put anything in it.
Me and our other friend were like, nope, we dumped everything out of that decanter. I was like, sorry, whiskey, but you gotta go.
Yep.
Took 5 Xbox games, a PlayStation 5 game, and a lot of rum with it. It's pretty upsetting.
Yeah, and I have mine on a shelf with other collectibles, and I was like, no, we're not. You're not exploding right here.
Mine was with the rest of the liquor, thankfully, but I just spilled. I was more upset about the Basil Hayden toast that went all over my counter and my shirt and the floor and
rip.
Yeah.
Thankfully, there was one collector's edition. It was last year's show before the new one came out. It just exploded. So, still playing digital on 22 because it's on Game Pass. I haven't went out and actually purchased it yet. But that was the only one that's like not a normal game I could just go find and trade out. So
All that wet paper.
Yeah. I tried to like get cute and like use a hairdryer to they crunchy boys now. First console we're going to talk about, Brian and I both had it on our list. It's probably pretty obvious if you've listened. Brian, why don't you tell us about the original Xbox and why you love collecting for it?
Yeah, obviously this is my favorite console to collect for. I've said it previously. Obviously I'm talking about it now. But there's so many reasons, right? I think the easiest one's the nostalgia factor. This is the first console other than the original PlayStation that with older childhood of like getting really into video games, right? Original Xbox is what we got. I remember vividly getting it when it came out, like holiday season, getting Munch's Odyssey, Max Payne, the original Max Payne, and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X. I mean, there's such a big library for the original Xbox. It's one of the main reasons why I like collecting for it. There's a lot of hidden gems. There's a lot of exclusives that kind of fly under the radar. I mean, obviously you have your bangers like Halo and things like that, but Arx Vitalis is a great game. Just one I can think of instantly. Stubbs the Zombie. There's a lot of cult games on the original Xbox. I feel like a
cult console. I mean, it's like it was the one that started the Xbox brand, but it was definitely overshadowed by its competition, and I feel like there's a lot of games that kind of got overshadowed with it too.
Oh, I mean, it was the first one that Microsoft put out, so you go up to, Nintendo's already a staple, and then Sony already just killed it with PlayStation 1, and they already had the clout. So it's kind of hard to go
successful
up.
too. So, yeah. So
well, I mean, when did the Xbox come out? Before PS2 or after?
It's after.
It was a smidge after, right?
It wasn't too long. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe a year.
So that's what I mean. Like PlayStation, like the PS2 had the clout of Sony's success.
Yeah.
So why would I go buy an Xbox right after that?
And never looked back. And,
right.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of good games that kind of got lost in the shuffle, and then there's games that you're trying to talk about, like lost classics. There's tons of great. I know I'm going to sound like a fanboy here, but there's Sega games that kind of died on Xbox, like Panzer Dragoon. Like
it's kind of the Dreamcast too. Oddly, it's such a weird, unique console, and like it checks all the boxes for me collecting wise. Unique, weird games on it, spiritual successors, the cultism stuff. But no, also there's a lot of party games for it that you don't think of. I mean, I think people think of the N64 as like the go-to party console because of like Mario Party and GoldenEye, but the original Xbox had 4 controller ports, and there's a lot of really good party games. I remember like Brute Force as a kid, and like Halo LAN parties, and even like Fusion Frenzy. Yeah, it's not as good as Mario Party, but they actually pushed like the couch co-op of that console, and it's a reason why it's fun to dust off and play now, honestly.
Yeah, one of the reasons why it was on my list as well is there was a long time where nobody gave a damn about Xbox games. And
no, they did not.
There were honey holes everywhere. Any flea market, any game store, you knew the Xbox section had not been tapped, and you could find a lot of them just priced them all universal. There wasn't like, oh, this one's more because like, we don't care, it's Xbox, if we move it, great. So I've beefed up my original Xbox collection pretty quickly. Early on, it was, even now it's still cheaper, but before the big boom of collecting hit, like you could get every game for around $4 or $5, and it was a great time. I miss those days.
Oh yeah, I mean even now, you can go in and get a stack if you're trying to complete your collection like me, and it's still like, oh cool, I could skip a meal, or I can get 5, 6, 7 original Xbox games. Like easy choice for me.
Another thing I really love about this console is it had a lot of crazy controllers. Obviously, the big one being Steel Battalion. That's probably my favorite thing I have that I collect. It's not the most expensive. It's not the rarest, but every time I look at it, I'm like, I can't believe I have this. Being able to pilot a mech with a controller the size of your table is an experience you can only get on your original Xbox, and it's pretty exciting. The light gun that put out for Silent Scope, it's really cool. It could be a sniper rifle or a shotgun, which I love gimmicky controllers, the light guns games especially, and the Xbox had 2 really good ones. It had Silent Scope and it had House of the Dead 3. Well, it's like, okay, I'm using a shotgun in House of the Dead 3. Like, as soon as this light gun comes out, it's going to be trash. Nope, they put a pump on it. You could take the scope on or off. You could put a stock on it. It was like super intricate. And I remember getting it and being like amazed. And it had like the kickback in it, vibration. It was super cool. And it was like, oh, I'm going to go snipe some dudes. Hang on, let me sit here and put my long barrel on this light gun.
The scope. You can just put a scope on it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the arcade where it was a screen in it, but it's still just immersion,
It's a fond memory I have, but it's something that definitely got me into like, wow. And I think I bought that light gun complete in box for like $10, ended up getting a second one for like $15. Like,
You look finding it for that now.
Yeah, now, but this wasn't on people's radar for so long. You could go in and just scoop up stuff like that. Cause like there was nobody looking for a light gun for the original Xbox for a really long time. So
yeah, I remember for a while the original suggested light gun was the Mad Catz one with like the clip was the memory card, and that was the one that's actually on the box for House of the Dead 3. But who released that Silent Scope one? Do you remember? It's officially licensed like a Silent Scope rifle. So when they did the trilogy, it's like officially licensed for that game, but I don't remember who released it. But clearly they're like, all right, we can use this for House of the Dead because it's actually like a shotgun.
That's what I was surprised about, because like House of the Dead being a Sega game and Silent Scope being Konami is like whoever made that light gun was like,
they sold dollar signs, bro.
Yeah, it was pretty creative on their part.
There's so many memories though with the original Xbox, like even, bringing up that, and then I remember like playing, Dynasties on NFL Fever with my brother and my dad, and there's just so many memories. So yeah, I literally could sit here and talk about this console all day.
Pelican made that light gun.
Interesting.
So Barry, I know Xbox isn't one of your most beloved consoles, but you've even found some stuff to collect for it, which is pretty interesting since it's kind of known for having weak exclusives in the grand scheme of things. Do you have any thoughts on it?
Xbox, in my opinion, is what jump-started Star Wars games. I don't own a lot of Xbox games. I have 21, and I've got 6 more on a wish list, and that's all I want, like through the whole library. But Knights of the Old Republic is what came out on Xbox. I mean, it was a PC game, and then they ported it over, and that really was just like Star Wars got kind of big because of that game. Republic Commando was an exclusive until very, very recently. So the Star Wars had a big following on Xbox, and that was surprising. Jedi Knight, what was the other one?
Jedi Outcast.
Yeah, so like, good. I mean, they are still primarily PC games, but at that time when the Xbox came out, like, that was trying to compete with PC, and that was the start of the whole, like, oh, PC is going to be dead here soon. That was the beginning of it, I think, with the Xbox, because, people are like, wow, hey, I could play this on PC, and it's like, well, I could play this on my Xbox.
Yeah, I think there was 2 fairly close to launch. There's an Obi-Wan game that was exclusive to Xbox.
Yep.
Then there was a Starfighter game. It was like the Episode 1 ships.
It was Jedi Starfighter.
Yeah.
And it had, on the cover, it was Obi-Wan's Starfighter from, I think, the second movie. I'm not a big Starfighter fan. Ship fighting's fun in Battlefront. Like Battlefront 2 had the ship fighting. Battlefront 1 and 2 are on that console. So, and a lot of those Star Wars games like really retained their value when Xbox made them backwards compatible. For that reason specifically, like Xbox had an amazing Star Wars lineup. And I don't think any other system has ever competed with that unless you want to talk about PC. But I mean, for me, like there's not a lot on there I want because Xbox, the West is not big into RPGs. So I've got...
Yeah, what Western RPGs is tough on the Xbox. That's where, they drop the ball a little bit. I mean, Japan in general. So I could see why it wouldn't really fit into your collection.
Yeah, and it was also very odd that Shenmue 2 came out on Xbox only. Like, that's what Sega decided to put it on.
Sega had an exclusive deal with Microsoft. So they did Crazy Taxi, House of the Dead, all those Jet Grind. They had a deal with Microsoft because they were very buddy-buddy.
Interesting.
It's Dreamcast too.
It's weird to go from a Dreamcast to a Xbox.
Yep.
Might be a reason why it's on my list.
But I will say the one thing that I really want is a Steel Battalion. I had an opportunity to get one very long time ago, and I was not into collecting Xbox. And I said, that's too much money for me. So I didn't buy it. I have a very, very fond memory of Nate coming over all the way on the other side of town, bringing his Steel Battalion so we could play it. And we were horrible at it. It was awesome.
It's a little challenging.
Yeah.
But it was a blast. Well,
it was so ambitious. One of the most ambitious things I've ever seen, especially for that era. And it's got a controller that's 3 parts and 1 billion buttons on it. And 2 analog flight stick things. I don't know. It was nutty. Like, people talk about flight simulators being difficult and, drive sims kind of being difficult too. But I'm like, bro, you don't know until you've got a whole panel in front of you.
And you're being shot at.
Flight simulators that don't have all of the buttons. It's like you got a flight stick and a shoot button. That's it. This one's got like 40,000 buttons and they're going to alarms going to go off.
Pedals.
And your thing is going to fall over and you got to hit. I don't know. How many buttons are on that thing?
40?
I just think it's awesome how like the actual ejector switch, you have to like flip the glass up and then flip the switch.
It's so awesome.
It's so immersive.
So awesome.
So many lights going off and stuff. You're like, what in the world? Another thing I want to touch on really quick for the original Xbox. Yeah, the backwards compatibility of the Xbox though. The fact that it was, quote, HD, a lot of the games hold up pretty well on modern TVs, so being able to just throw it into a modern Xbox and play your old original Xbox games is a pretty cool thing still.
I think that's what revitalized it too. I mean, when it came out natively, it was 720p.
Right.
So when Xbox said, hey, or Microsoft said, hey, we're going to do backwards compatibility with original Xbox games, and here's the list, and that really jump-started people wanting to go back and find them. And that's kind of when you see the jump. Because I remember when that happened, Star Wars Battlefront just like buku expensive. I'm sitting here like, I got the same thing on PlayStation. Like, whatever. Why is this game 30, 70? I think it got up to 70 at one point.
That was crazy.
Battlefront 2.
God.
It was insane. And people, were like, it's backwards compatible. So I saw the appeal. It definitely brought a light to Xbox original games that I don't think people were seeing at that time. And now people like you guys are like, I told you so. You should have looked at this library. And people like me are like, there are some good games in there.
Last topic on the original Xbox. We were talking about RPGs. My favorite game ever made is on the original Xbox. It's the only console you can actually play it on. That would be Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. And it's a great port. The load times were atrocious when it came out, but playing it on like the modern Xbox, it's actually a pretty good port, and it holds up surprisingly well.
That's true. They never ported it to any other console like the classic Skyrim approach, but they did give it that nice, 1X upgrade.
It runs so well on the 1X. I mean, I'm talking under half a second load times. If you played it on the original Xbox, that was the knock. It's like, let me go make a sandwich when I open the door, but now it changes everything.
And maybe it's not surprising, but it's surprising to me that the Morrowind runs so well on the 1X, but then you load in Oblivion and it's just hot garbage.
Yep.
Hot garbage. Like, it's bug riddled out the wazoo.
Bethesda gonna Bethesda.
So
poor Oblivion. Great game though. But
so as a Morrowind lover, do you prefer it on console or PC? Because I think I tried it on PC.
So now I go back and play it on PC.
Yeah.
There was a time in my life where it was way more accessible on Xbox, so I played it on Xbox because we had it on PC growing up too. But if Brian was playing it and beat me to it, I'd go jump on the Xbox and play it. So I have fond memories of it. I hated having to buy it twice to get the DLC when it was new, but now I have literally 4 copies of it sitting on my shelf because I have the Platinum Hits one, the normal one. So I prefer PC because like having a mouse is a game changer, and having quick keys is a game changer.
Now I will say, we would be remiss not to mention the one thing that ensured the Xbox's survival, and that was Halo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, without Halo, I don't think the Xbox would have survived.
I don't think that's a disagreeable statement.
Anybody that had an Xbox, the fact that it was 4-player like a party game, and it's almost sandboxy, and it's like, hey, let's go in and just rockets only. So fun. Everybody, like, if you didn't have it, you knew a friend who went over and you played it. And I didn't have an Xbox growing up, but my uncle had one. And anytime I went over there, that's the game I played.
I mean, the split screen of it, the multiplayer was great. I mean, fond memories of like LAN parties, literally, how many people you can bring in daisy chain 8 Xboxes together, like, so cool.
Well, and then talking about like, hey, people are, Halo on that's not very collectible, but the Halo Xbox is.
Right.
Very extremely expensive console. Halo is a big part of Xbox's history, and not to mention it would do a disservice to the console, especially considering how collectible that orange boy is.
Right. A little off topic, but kind of on, like, another weird memory just popped in my head talking about Halo. I remember when Halo 2 came out, like, how big of an effing deal it was. Like, I remember we went to the mall, and they had just lines out the door, and it was like, what in the world? And it's Halo 2. And they literally had, like, orange tape across the top of it, do not release on this release date. It's funny because I was in a local game store. So I was with my significant other, and there was the orange, one of the orange do not sell by dates, and she was like, what is this? And I was like, well, you see, like, street dates used to be a big deal, now it's, whatever, but I'm like, you don't understand how big of a deal Halo 2 was when it came out. Like, there was armed security, and it was wild.
Yeah, I remember that, I think the first picture we saw, and it was Chief standing on a rock dual-wielding SMGs. And everybody was like, whoa, we can dual-wield! Like, it was the cool, I don't know, having 2 guns in 2 hands was the most revolutionary idea, apparently.
Dual-wielding.
Yeah, like, it was like dual-wielding changed the game of games. That was it. People went wild for that idea.
So, Xbox is kind of a unique thing where I feel like the last couple of years, there's been some games that were like, they're obviously under people's radar, so they've increased with the price once awareness has kind of gone up. We can go over a few of those now. First one I want to throw out there is Curse, the Eye of Isis. It's a horror game. There is a PC version on Steam, but this is approaching $100 now. And
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, anything horror always going to retain value, but when you find like, oh, it's an Xbox horror game, that's not a lot of that on the console, so obscure, and people are just now kind of catching on to it. So its price has been going up every year. I was fortunate enough to get one pretty early on when in one of the honey holes. Brian, do you have any kind of under the radar games that we were talking about?
I mean, I think the easy ones, like, it's on PS2 also, but everyone talks about Jurassic Park Operation Genesis, but it's a great game. It still holds up. I think, honestly, it's better than the newer Jurassic Park games. I mentioned it earlier, Arx Vitalis, super cool game. It's like dark gothic. Another game would be Enclave. They're actually doing an HD remaster of that now, which I find surprising. Mechanically, not the best, but it kind of felt like Dark Souls before Dark Souls. Dino Crisis 3 is another one to me. It's not recommended to play this game, but as a fan of the series, being exclusive is pretty interesting. But you, Barry, anything else top your head?
Not anything that's going under the radar. Otogi did go under the radar for a very, very, very long time, and now it's popping up because From Software's a hot ticket item. So they used to be, you saw them and they were cool, but they were scarce because nobody really bought the game. Another one is Call of Cthulhu, and they tried to do that PS4 reimagining thing, and it just fell so flat. So Call of Cthulhu was a really big one that people were, at least in the era of Xbox collectors, because they knew what they were going for. Like, Call of Cthulhu was one that was like, I need this Xbox game. So that's one of them. Arx Fatalis is another one, too, that, like, only Xbox collectors kind of really knew about that game for a long time and picked it up.
Obviously, we mentioned Steel Battalion earlier. That's one that if you can have the opportunity to get it, like, I could not encourage everyone to go play it more. It's not an experience like that in anything. I got to throw out Jet Grind really quick. It's actually Jet Set Radio Future on Xbox, but that's one that I cannot recommend enough.
Comes in a double pack with Sega GT 2002.
Get it that way. It's way cheaper.
It is way cheaper.
There's a couple Rare games. When Microsoft acquired Rare, Conquer and Grabbed by the Ghoulies are games that I would keep an eye on. Conquer's always kind of expensive. I feel like it's kind of settled down in the $30 to $40 range, but Grabbed by the Ghoulies is one I would say keep an eye on. I could see it going up. It kind of has a cult following too.
I think there's also some unsung franchises that are screaming for a reboot, a la Brute Force. Not the best game ever made, but plug-in floor controllers, do split screen, just set brain to neutral and shoot stuff. Good time. There's a Dinosaur Man. Like, come on.
This podcast is very dinosaur friendly. All right, so the next console we're going to talk about, Brian and Barry both had on their list, and that is the PlayStation Portable. Barry, how about you start off with this one?
I don't want to sound presumptuous to say I feel like I have more to say about it than Brian, but...
No, you do. This is like one of your... You actually... I mean, I like the PSP. I grew up with one, but you got me into some like really obscure games that I love now, so...
All right, so the PSP came out 2004 Japan, 2005 North America, so it was like holiday and then spring. It was very close. It wasn't like they had a couple years of separation. Big thing about this one is it was Sony's first handheld console, and it had this USB connectability where it had a big push where it's like, hey, you can connect to your PS3 and like share game file saves and all this other crazy stuff, but you could also connect to a PC, and that opened the door for jailbreaking, which you're not supposed to condone, but I did it. All right, like I was in high school and I'm like, yo, I got this PSP, and at the time there was not a big online library. There was no classics, like a PlayStation 1 classic, so I'm like, I have the ability to play Final Fantasy VII on the go. Like, I'm doing it. So I went through all this crazy... Like, I think it took a week for me to figure out how to break this thing in order to put basically like a Final Fantasy ROM on a memory card and play it. And I got it. And it took up the whole, 2 gigabyte memory card. But I had the game on my PSP and I could play it wherever I wanted. And that's the appeal of handhelds. It's interesting because I feel like I vibe with handhelds a little bit more than you two. So I've got a different perspective on it. Something about sitting on the couch having a handheld in my hands, it's not like I need to take it anywhere. I can still play that puppy on the couch or in bed or whatever. Like, I'll sit there on the same couch with my big ass TV and still play a PSP game. Like, it's something nostalgically comfortable about it. I mean, I grew up on a Game Boy. You guys did too. Game Boy Advance was like a big part of my childhood, so it feels good. Especially the PSP. The screen size is so big. It's graphically, it's amazing that they crammed all that into this tiny little package. The one thing is it used UMD discs and the casings are prone to breaking, but you could fix them pretty easily as long as you didn't pop that little center disc out of it. If you pop that disc out, you were screwed.
Game over on that.
You were done. So you had to be very careful. Stupid amount of special editions. The thing about the PSP, though, is I bought that for one game and one game only, and that is Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, which was announced before it came out. It was announced E3 2004, and it was like, oh, PSP is coming out in spring of 2005, and I'm like, I need this. I need this game. I didn't care what else I got. That could have been the only game I got on that console, and I would have been happy. Because then when that thing got in my hands, and I'm finally playing this game after 3 years of it being announced, and you get to the ending and I'm like, this is the first game I've cried in. Like, it was so good, and everybody's just all of the games released, that is the game for the PSP. That was why I bought a PSP, and I had to buy one later because some kid on the school bus broke it.
Damn.
But that's my big PSP memory. Brian is another PSP lover. Like, what? I know you've got something.
Yeah, I remember when this thing came out, I remember being like, this is the first handheld with like some power behind it, where you'd feel like you were playing PS2 games on the go. And I remember asking my mom for Christmas, be like, yo, I want a PSP, and didn't think I'd get one. And I got, it's interesting, I've never seen the box variant too for the one she got me. It's almost like a shoebox. It's smaller, obviously, but I remember getting that with like decked out with all the accessories and the carrying cases, thinking it was hot shit, and it was great.
Was it just the console, or was it a bundled one?
It was like a bundled one. It had like
with like a game.
It was like a music bundle, so it had like a almost like an iPod wheel for going through MP3s on it. And,
interesting.
Yeah,
I remember actually we got it for Christmas. I just never got to play it much.
I hogged the shit out of the PSP, bro. Yeah. But it was cool. I mean, you could play literally like sports games on the go. I remember playing a lot of NCAA football, a lot of hockey. Like I said, it's so weird. You talked about how comfortable it is to feel. For having one thumbstick, there was a lot of games that, like, even shooting games that felt good with one thumbstick. PSP is an awesome console. It's underappreciated as all hell.
I mean, that is one thing to point out. I don't want to cut anybody off, but like, if you didn't utilize the thumbstick very well, it was so awkward. And for me, I think that's why the PSP worked so well, because my entire library is RPGs.
Yeah.
Majority of those don't really use a thumbstick, or a lot of them do too, but you have to like use this thumbstick to move, but also use the bumpers to move the camera. And sometimes it did feel a little bit awkward if that was what the game relied on majority of the time. And clearly they fixed that with the Vita.
Right. Well, then there's weird things that, like, you talked about hooking it up to the PS3. It was resistance on PSP. If you hooked it up to the PlayStation 3, you could use a PS3 controller, and talk about a game changer.
What?
Yeah, it was rad.
Sick.
Yeah, and they added extra missions and stuff. It was so cool.
I remember just being able to carry because we're big sports gamers, and I remember being able to carry over my franchise from NBA Live 2005, 2006, and being like, excuse me, like, I don't have to like start over. I can just like keep going. And then when the show came out, you could actually just continue your created player, take him portable, put it back on your PS3, and just continue your save like it was nothing. I was like, this isn't like a portable game. This is like gaming portable. It's crazy.
And it was so undervalued, I feel like. Like, they had this amazing mechanic, almost like the Wii U's gamepad, where it has this whole different dynamic to this console. And if the developer kind of didn't really do anything with it, it was lost. And that capability of almost like save sharing across consoles, it was lost.
So ambitious.
PSP. It was ambitious, and I don't think it was utilized very well for it to stick around in any capacity.
Another thing about the PSP, I just like collecting. One of the reasons why I like collecting for it, it's going to sound stupid, but I think the UMDs and the small cases just look cool on a shelf. It's not like, the PS Vita games where they're super tiny. It's almost like a half DVD case lined up. They look cool. And for a time there, PSP was cheap. You could get all the exclusives minus, Persona and RPG stuff up your alley, Barry, for affordable.
I mean, they were still cheap.
They were cheap.
They were cheap, man.
Yeah.
I've got a huge chunk of my PSP games early on, and I was like, dude, these games are still fun to play now. They hold up extremely well. Like you said, there's nothing wrong with sitting on your couch and just playing on your couch, because it's console quality games on the go. It's awesome.
I mean, a lot of people do that with their Switch, where they're like, I like playing it in handheld mode. I just sit on my couch, and it's the same feeling, just 20 years ago almost.
I think the form factor of the console itself, with like the rounded edges and stuff, it's not a chore to sit there and play it like it would be for some other handhelds, a la the Lynx or something. But like the PSP, you can sit there, the battery lasts a long time.
It's got a pretty decent battery life.
Yeah, and in worst case scenario, you can plug it into the wall. Like
if your battery hasn't gotten all full yet, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that is one thing to note. The PSP Go was a kind of ambitious idea, which this is the first like idea of a digital only console where it doesn't have the ability to have a disc in it. The only thing you can play on it is you have to download it from their digital store. And so PSP Go's are useless now for obvious reasons because you can't connect to Wi-Fi on those things because the Wi-Fi inside of the actual device is so old. It can't even connect to new Wi-Fi signals. Like my PSP cannot connect to a Wi-Fi signal. I have to have old Wi-Fi. And I'm not having old Wi-Fi. So if I need a firmware update, you got to go plug that into your computer, download the firmware update from their website, and then install it on the PSP that way, which there's workarounds. And I truly appreciate the fact that it is so PC compatible that they have those backups where it's like, hey, we have the firmware on the website, or sometimes it comes with a disc. Like there's a game I have that was bugged so bad that they had to re-release. It's Tales of Eternia. And it bugged so bad they had to re-release it and include the firmware update on the disc just in case people weren't able to download it because it needed that update.
Yeah, I feel like the mod community and like the fan community has kept PSP like they're so passionate about it. There's like you said, jailbreaking early on was like a thing for it. It was something people got super interested in, and I feel like that's continued even. Like you can still mod the hell out of a PSP and do all sorts of crazy things with it.
I mean, people were doing, like you guys said, you guys had the mod chips for PS1. Like, people were doing it with older consoles, but this is like, I think PSP really brought it up to be a common thing now, where me as a middle school, high school kid is trying to do it at home on my computer. Like, it was so accessible to do.
Say a funny story. I remember the last Game Shark I bought was for PSP.
Yeah.
And it was like a file sharing Game Shark for PSP. And the weird thing of note, I don't know why it's popped in my head, it had like the full 9 Inch Nails album of like whatever year it came out at the
with
time
teeth.
with it. Yeah.
Oh my God.
So you can have like it's like what a weird thing for 9 Inch Nails to sign off on, right? Like Game Shark PSP.
What about you, Nate? What do you think of the PSP?
PSP, if we ever did an episode on like consoles I wish I had more of and could have more time with, it would be on that list for sure. I actually really enjoy the PSP. Like I said, I didn't get to play as much because Brian loved the PSP, which is okay. I have no bitter feelings about that. But no, it's super fun. I feel like untapped potential is like the word that like the thought that comes to mind when I think of PSP, and like I appreciate it. And I said it earlier with the Xbox. There is time where someone would take PSP games at a flea market, or whatever. They'd get thrown with the UMDs, and you could get PSP games for $1, $2 complete. It was so fun to hunt for because a lot of it was just considered junk because like all the system failed and people were just trying to get rid of stuff. And
I mean, it kind of did.
Yeah,
it kind of did. I mean, that was something I wanted to touch on, and like 3DS and DS is the exact same way. These consoles came out during, as far as me, we call it the dark ages of RPGs. So Xbox 360 released in 2005, same year that a PSP did. And then shortly after the 360, we've got the PS3 come out. And, you know, when a new gen console dumps, that's what everybody wants. And the PlayStation 3 was notoriously difficult to develop for. So there's a lot of developers for RPG titles that it was slow. It was very slow for anything to come out on that. And the Western didn't really catch up with it. I mean, we've got Oblivion came out on it, and that's a Western RPG. They tried to do something with Blue Dragon. Miss Walker came out and dumped Lost Odyssey on there. So, I mean, there are some titles like, you know, Mass Effect and Dragon Age came out, but all in all, those consoles like killed RPGs for the community because we have to compete against things like Gears of War and Call of Duty. And that's when those really got big. Like first-person shooters were big in that era. So RPGs and turn-based and strategy games all got, you know, pushed to the side. And it's like, well, it's in the handheld market now. So a lot of those are being made in handhelds. And that's why this speaks to me so well, is because I'm like, if I want those games, I have to go play them on this console. That's what I'm collecting for. So it's fun to go out and like, there's so many weird ones that you've probably never, there's some that I'm like, I've never even seen this before. When did this come out? What is this? I don't know. I'm buying it. Hex's Force. I don't know what that is, but I'm like, this looks JRPG, so I'm buying it. That there's so many out there like that, and they're so experimental on the PSP too, because it was kind of easy to push out.
You can see early on when the PSP was first announced and people that were developing games for it, like they tried to put Oblivion on a PSP. There's like prototype files you can go out and find, and like clearly developers were super excited to like work on this thing. I don't know if sales started turning away, but like you said, even the RPGs that came out at the time, like they're very action heavy RPGs. They weren't traditional RPGs.
I mean, I think that's an interesting point too, because they were excited about it, and then once they realized the connectability capability of the PS3, okay, well now the PS3 is so hard to develop for. Why would I do it for the PS3 console and the PSP? My dev studio has to do this crazy amount of work for it. So, Xbox was so transparent about their accessibility to develop for their console that a lot of people are like, forget it. Why would I make Madden on a PSP? We're just going to start doing it, on the Xbox and stick with that.
It's weird because I don't feel like Sony sent the PSP out to die like they did the Vita, but it's almost like they were kind of like, well, if it happens, it happens. It's a damn shame.
Sony had to rely on the PSP. That's the thing, is the PS3 was such a rocky start that everything that was happening on that PSP, it was the PSP and the Blu-ray drive.
Yep.
And until they could get that PlayStation 3 to actually function properly and not be a giant chungus of a mess, and the Slim came out, and everybody was like, oh wow, the PS3 is actually pretty cool. Like, the fact that the PS3 had a Blu-ray drive and the PSP was the only thing hanging on for them at that moment. Because Xbox kind of murdered themselves in the beginning and also kind of murdered PS3. They were like, Halo 3, what do we got? Layer?
When you have to buy 360s because you keep getting a red ring,
Yes. But yeah, the dark ages of RPGs is kind of what the community calls that era. So we didn't really get an RPG revitalization until PS4 and PS4.
I feel like it came back pretty strong.
Very strong.
Yeah.
Very strong on PS4.
I want to say really quick, as far as the PSP, one of the reasons why I like collecting for it, because it's there's weird things like you still find sealed UMDs like everywhere, and it's like I'm never gonna watch these. I'm like, there's better ways to watch movies now, right? But like, it just speaks to like the ambition and like how versatile the console was, where you can literally just. I remember at stores they'd be next to like the DVDs, be like, oh, your other option's a UMD disc. If you want Godzilla 98 on the go, there you go, there it is. Like,
well, and it's funny to think about. Sony was trying to do what Microsoft's doing now. Sony was trying to be the end-all be-all portable electronic system where it's like it's got the music tab. You can put music on there. It's got the videos. You play DVDs, smashed
like
into a UMD disc on it.
Remote play like a thing? I remember you had to have like a hellacious internet connection, but you could still do it.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was it late? Was it a late thing?
I think it was, yeah.
I attempted to play MLB remotely. It didn't go great.
It chugged, but I mean, look at what Microsoft's doing now. Yeah,
you could sit there and be like, this is my home console on my PSP screen. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were, I think, way too ambitious for the time. I don't think they were ready for it. I mean, and we also have to not only mention the fact that they tried to do a proprietary memory card, and that really killed it.
Yeah.
With minor tweaks, this could have been the next Game Boy, in my opinion. There's little things that kept it from going to the next level, but on paper, it's a great console. It's one that I would enjoy collecting for if I could find stuff for it. Part of the time you find stuff for it, it's missing cases and manuals.
That is the handheld curse.
It is the curse.
I think that's why it's so fun, though. Also, when you find that and you're like, it's complete, and the UMD disc isn't shredded, like that's a good feeling to find something like that.
Yeah, I enjoy collecting, like Brian touched on UMDs. I have a little Nick Cage one going, and then I have
Nick Cage movies on UMD. It's pretty good.
Yeah. The like Starship Troopers, some Godzilla movies on there where it's like, do I need this? No, but it's like they're so cheap when you find them even now. You're like, okay, I'll pay $2 to have Starship Troopers on UMD. Why not?
I think it's crazy how many you still find sealed. And if you look online, there's people that have cases full of just sealed copies of, Mr. and Mrs. Smith on UMD. Like, okay, sure.
So let's go over some games for this. Barry, since you have the deepest library out of all of us, how about you start?
I do have a deep PSP library. I mean, as far as me, like there's a lot of notable series that have exclusives on PSP that never came out anywhere else. I don't know if they'll ever port it anywhere else. Ys 8 got revitalized in the PlayStation 4 era. I think that series died. A lot of people didn't know about the series because there was one game on the PS2 and it didn't really do that well, but there was a lot of Ys revitalizing on the PSP. So when Ys 8 came out, a lot of people started looking back and being like, ooh, what happened to 7? 7 was only on the PSP. That was it. And, PSP also brought up the 1 and 2, Book 1 and 2 Chronicles. Very, very good rendition of it. Another one, Persona 2, specifically, I actually found this out recently because I didn't know this, but there's Persona 1, and it's basically the exact same thing as the Persona 1 on PS1. Persona 3 Portable is pretty much the exact same thing as Persona 3, but you can play as a female character instead of a male one. But the second game is actually the first part of the story. It's called Innocent Sin. The second half of the story is the Persona 2 that we got on the PS1, and then the first half of the story we never got until this PSP rendition. So if you want the full Persona 2 story, you have to play the PSP 1 and the PS1 version. 2 different games. And
good thing they're extremely affordable and easy to find, right?
Yes, extremely affordable games. But it's stuff like that where you have exclusivity on the PlayStation Portable that the only way to get it at this point may be on the digital format. Like Trails in the Sky that I'm playing right now, the only other way to play it, like it is on PC, which is nice, but they're so exclusive to this console, it's just dumb expensive. I'm glad they have a digital version for people who don't want to play it. But it's a notable one. Persona 2 is, especially with as popular as Persona is right now. Brian, do you have any good titles?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's so many different exclusives from like every different genre. Like you have huge franchises. There's Metal Gear exclusive games on this thing that are absolutely incredible. Those are the easy ones. There's God of War exclusive. Well, they released them on PS3 down the line later, but
they started there though.
Right, they're console quality, like huge mega franchises. But then there's also weird, obscure things that you don't like. Capcom did a lot of exclusives. I don't want to say arcade games or things like that, but I mean, there's like Power Stone port that runs amazing on the PSP. It's 1 and 2 on one UMD, which is a steal because Power Stone's expensive as shit. But there's like Ultimate Ghost and Goblins. There's a Mega Man exclusive power up, I think.
I feel like PSP was kind of the first console to bring in the whole like compilation style. Yeah. I mean, Mega Man had a big one.
Metal Slug Anthology. Yeah. There's so many.
Yeah.
Like it's awesome just to have those on the go. There's exclusive Grand Theft Auto games. It's crazy how many big franchises have exclusive games. Like the Killzone games, it's isometric, but it's fun as hell. There's Siphon Filter. I mean, I could just keep thinking of stuff. There's so many.
If you're a major like Sony franchise, there's probably a PSP version of the game out there that's like shockingly good too. Like they're console quality games.
Killzones, or there's a first-person shooter Konami made. It's not the best.
Coded
Arms, yeah, but it's exclusive FPS on the go with one thumbstick that plays great, and 2 plays even better. It's just jarring how many actual exclusives there are that you don't think about for these mega franchises, almost like forgotten games for, I mean, how many people talk about Metal Gear Acid 2, but it's a great game.
Not enough people because it's a fantastic game.
And it's like the only you're going to get the full experience because it came with like a 3D goggle thing, almost like Nintendo Labo. You throw over the PSP and it's in 3D, and the 3D looks amazing. It's so unique and cool.
Yeah, obviously the Metal Gear games are worth mentioning. They're the card-based. There's not another Metal Gear game like that. And
you talk about them all the time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's one of the few games I got to enjoy on PSP before Brian started hogging it. But even Peace Walker, I know it's been, ported 360, PS3 later on, but this was a handheld game. It's open world, almost like Monster Hunting, except you're hunting for troops to like build an army with. It's crazy ambitious for a video game, let alone like a portable console.
Had expansions for it.
Yeah, but there's I remember the online play on PSP. We haven't really talked about that, but I remember playing online with SOCOM and it feeling like better than the last time I played SOCOM. Like, except the last time I played was on PS2. I'm playing it on PSP and being blown away. So yeah, out of any console I have, anytime I hunt with Barry, it's always educating and enlightening. PSP specifically though, I have gotten so many games in my library where Barry's like, you need to pick that up, bro, that's cheap. And I'm like, oh, okay. Turns out it's like a $60 to $80 game I got for $5-10.
Well, that's the beauty of all of us being friends and having different interests too, where it's like I collect for this console that you guys don't really know too much about. And so when we go out together, it's a fun time where I go out on Xbox and you're like, yo, look at this. I'm like, what is this? You know so much more about it.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's, Nights in the Nightmare, Tales of the World. They're games I probably wouldn't have been on my radar until like much later. But I'm like, hey, I'm here. Barry's like, get this. And it turned out very well for me. Yeah, I'm a pretty big Phantasy Star fan, and Barry's like, those are 2 portable? And I was like, I need this. So, pour one out for Phantasy Star physical. Speaking of Phantasy Star, where the franchise got the most love and attention, the console I chose that we're going to talk about next is the Sega Genesis.
Woo!
I don't want to spend an hour of your guys' time just gushing over a console. But why I enjoy collecting Genesis is kind of piggybacking off points we made for the original Xbox and the PSP, where it wasn't the most popular through the test of time, So once people started hunting for games actively, no one dug through Genesis bins. People were looking for Super Nintendo. People were looking for grails in the Super Nintendo section. You could find complete in-box copies of Genesis games for the same price as a cart, and they were probably in better condition because they were in hard cases. People stacked them up in flea markets, game stores, and were like, they're all $4. Just grab whatever you want and get them out of here because I need the room. And I beefed up my Genesis collection to like an insane degree, complete in-box ones, because people were just like, no one comes in here for Genesis. And I was like, more for me. So
Right.
It's kind of funny. I think people forget how close like the race really was with Super Nintendo and Genesis, because I think Super Nintendo's had more lasting power. But there's a ton of games out there for Genesis. The library is huge. Unless you are made of money, like you're always going to be hunting down Genesis games. So it's kind of fun for me.
I mean, Genesis was so interesting to me because it was like, it was their attempt to really push arcade into a home console. You know, like Sega had Master System, and honestly, Master System was really just like Wonder Boy came out on it, Phantasy Star had its start on it, but there's not a lot of big titles that came out of Master System that crossed over to Genesis.
They don't age as well, for sure.
Right, and so when Genesis came out, it was like, that was the arcade console, and that's what people remember about that one when they talk about some of those games, is the arcade ones, not, you know, like Super Nintendo had a lot of great titles on it, but arcade fans, like, they wanted a Genesis.
Yeah, I think the gameplay for Genesis overall is just so much faster. I think sometimes it's a lot easier to just throw in a random Genesis cart and have a good time with it. Sometimes the speed of the gameplay it's just more arcadey, like you said. It's a little more like, hey, I've got 30 minutes to go. I'm going to take something off the shelf, throw it into Genesis, and have a blast with it. Genesis's library is so deep for every genre. There's all-time classics that kind of get forgotten because they don't have like the Nintendo power behind them.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I know RPGs is like the weakest link on Genesis probably, but there's some great RPGs on there. Fortunately, there's a couple we'll never be able to afford. But Phantasy Star had 2 and 3 or 4 on there. Unfortunately, Senti's on there, which I'd love to play someday. But
I would love to play Senti. That's one of those games that, like, I want one so bad, but it is so expensive.
It's like,
and it's crazy because, like, I'm not a big Zelda fan, and it's supposed to be like a Zelda clone, but better.
Yeah, the art style I think looks really cool, and maybe we can pool our money together someday and you have like a joint custody Senti.
It's also worth mentioning that, like, the Genesis, it was the Mega Drive in the UK and Europe, and they have a lot of exclusives that only came out there that I'm interested in, too.
Oh, yeah. And I'm kind of finding that there's a lot I missed out on, too, early on when I was like, I'm making Genesis a priority, where I'm like, dang, I should have went back and got that version because it's a little different. Or I just recently started dabbling in, like, PAL Genesis games. It's funny also how there's some that are super dirt common here that in Japan they're like holy grails. Like Maximum Carnage is like a holy grail in
Oh, really?
PAL.
I've got 2.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Separation Anxiety is like a holy grail in the PAL region for Genesis, and it's like for the dollar.
With Spider-Man games being expensive
because it's Spider-Man.
Well, yeah, but it's like it's this beloved franchise, but overseas, like, there's always like a weird, like the Super Nintendo Revenge of the Sinister Six is so expensive of a Super Nintendo game.
Oh, well, I don't know if you like, Spider-Man is one of the biggest deals in Japan as far as like Western comic hero. Like, Spider-Man is a huge deal.
That's on a TV show.
I totally get it.
I think he was in porn magazines.
Yeah,
as ads.
Yeah, actually, I know.
Like, they would put Spider-Man anywhere and everywhere.
The foreign comic collecting stuff, I know about that. Yeah,
yes,
there's Playboy specifically.
Is that what it was?
Japanese Playboy. Yeah,
it wasn't porn. Then it was just Playboy.
Right, just articles. 15 issues.
I love thinking about that. It's like Spider-Man is such a big deal over there, so it makes sense that those kinds of games are more wanted. And I'm sure that they were not more printed in that market. Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
as a Spider-Man fan, I feel like a failure.
Wow.
I know.
Like, take off that jacket.
Taking it off.
Platformers on Genesis, I feel like they don't get enough shine. I mean, Rise Star is the one that everyone's going to kind of point to, but like obviously there's Sonic, and then there's Vectorman, so they're kind of common ones. But Rocket Knight Adventure, Dynamite Heady, there's some really good platform. Tin Head.
Rocket Knight is one of those that, like, I feel like they got lost. It's so good.
Yeah, it's
first one
really good. It's actually getting expensive now, unfortunately. The first one, like Brian said, don't bother with the second one. It's not a bad game. It's just not as good as the first one. But if you can think of a genre, there's a Genesis equivalent on there where it's like, I didn't even know about this game. It's super fun.
One of the I didn't mean to
you're good. Yeah.
cut you, but one of the Shining Force is a big Sega property that is in direct competition with Fire Emblem, and it's weird because we didn't have Fire Emblem over here in the States. So when Shining Force came over here, like in the West, people are like, what is this supposed to be? I don't know what this is. A lot of people liked it. It was this, tactical strategy game, but it didn't hold the same weight because we didn't understand what it was competing against. So it kind of died out very quickly.
I've always found it interesting people knock the Genesis library for RPGs, and like if you compare it to Super Nintendo, sure, but like Sword of Vermilion's on there too. That's a really good RPG. There's a lot of good overlooked ones. Yeah, I feel like it's one of those consoles, the more you look into, like the more pleasantly surprised you are, and it's fun to collect for that aspect. If we're talking arcade games like we touched on in the beginning, I mean, there's so many. Golden Axe, Streets of Rage.
Shinobi.
Yeah.
So good on the Genesis. It's better than the arcade version.
Absolutely.
I was going to say it's interesting the comparison between Super Nintendo and Genesis franchises. Like the exclusive Genesis Contra and the exclusive Genesis Castlevania. The argument can be made that they're better games than the Super Nintendo counterpart. It's not insane to say that. I prefer Castlevania 4 over Bloodlines, but I think Bloodlines is way more ambitious. I think it looks better. I think it sounds better.
I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's the same exact argument we get with new-gen consoles. It never dies. A lot of people don't care about the hardware. If the hardware is better, they want the games. Yep. And Nate all the time talks about how the sound chip's better in a Genesis, and I would agree.
Model 1.
But a lot of the people who are buying game, like, they don't care about the sound. They're just like, the game better be good. So there's this, like I said, the niche things that arcade people are really looking at. And I feel like that's kind of where it vibes with them, is how it plays. How the hardware runs is very important to those types of players.
For sure. And I think as far as hardware, I just thought there was shooters on Genesis I feel like are criminally underrated. There's so
Musha.
many. Musha's fantastic. It's on Switch Online. Like, if you haven't played it, please go play it. It's so good. I don't even love shooters. They're not like one of my favorite, but I sat there and played that game for a solid 2 hours like, holy shit, this is awesome. But yeah, they're so fast and fluid. The only one that I could compare that's like Genesis quality on Super Nintendo would be like UN Squadron. But even then, like it'd be so far down the list on Genesis for me. So another reason why I really enjoy collecting this console is all the crazy accessories, controllers, and again, they're cheaper. There's the activator ring, which I don't know if anyone's familiar with. You could stand in the middle of this circle and your body's your controller.
I've never heard of that.
It's the commercial. It's like they're playing Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, and these kids are like just like punching at the it's so bad. It's awesome. There's just crazy stuff that like is clearly gimmicky and like did not work very well. Yeah, the light guns for Sega Genesis were incredible. They had the Justifier and the Minister, which are just, they're huge, they're burly, they're way cooler than a Zapper. I'm sorry, like holding out like the 44 Magnum, like,
freaking dirty hairy gun.
Yes,
you're pulling out the arcade gun that literally is stuck to a cabinet. Like, that's why it feels so good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing more badass than sitting with your brother with like your blue revolver, and he's got a hot pink one. You're just smoking guys. Like, yeah, there's so many variants to the actual console itself too, and box variants. It's actually really fun to collect for as well. I mean, it came out with 3 main retail models, and there's exclusive pack-ins with all those.
Well, I mean, we can talk about what the Sega Genesis did that Super Nintendo did not. Was actually
Voltron just stacking shit into it.
I mean, yes, but gain a CD attachment.
One of my favorite consoles that I own is my CDX, and they kind of just got it right on that one. If that would have came out first, maybe it would have been a different thing than having to build a little transformer. But
for me, that's part of the fun, because I just like weird, stupid things. It's like sitting there and putting together the 32X with the CD. It's hilarious to look at. It just turns into this 25-pound monstrosity that has to find shelf space. It's great.
I mean, it was kind of cool though that like Genesis was doing that modular type of format where it's like, hey, here's an attachment that you can put on this console if you want to play different stuff, and it wasn't like you were forced to buy it. Like, you could choose to buy a 32X.
Extended the life of the console.
It's cool on paper until you realize it's all because it was infighting with Sega of America and Sega of Japan, and no one could get their dates right for consoles, so they like kept making half steps. But yeah, it's cool that all 3 of our Genesis probably look completely different based on like what model or what's hanging out of it. I think it's kind of funny. So let's go over some games. Barry, what do you have any notable Genesis games you want to talk about?
I only have 6 games, and it's the Phantasy Stars and Shining Force. So
what games though?
Good ones to have.
Phantasy Star 2, 3, 4, Shining Force 1 and 2, and then Ys 3. Which is notably the most garbage version of Ys ever. There's the same Wanderers of Ys is also on Super Nintendo. Genesis 1's more expensive for some reason. I don't really know why, but everybody in the Ys community has said Ys 3 is the worst of all of them.
It's the one I have the most time in, naturally. So Yeah, but Phantasy Star 4, special mention. I know people love it and rave about it, but I feel like through the eons of time, it's almost overlooked. It is absolutely one of the best 2D RPGs ever made. I think it does some incredible storytelling where it actually connects the rest of the Phantasy Star games together because they feel very separate until that one. I could go back and play that one anytime, any day, and just absolutely enjoy it.
Yeah, Phantasy Star 4 is definitely one of those titles in the RPG community that is very well known.
I think some games to point out, obviously the exclusives. I mean, it's the easy go-to, but like you said, the arcade games. Like, I mean, Altered Beast, there's so many arcade games. Revenge of Shinobi's awesome. Shout out to Spider-Man again.
Was Strider on Genesis?
Yeah, it's great on Genesis. But for me, I brought it up previously, like Castlevania Bloodlines, as a huge Castlevania fan, like forever, this was the only way you could play this game was like on Genesis, on cart. They finally put out the Castlevania Anniversary Collection and it's on there. But even like Contra Hardcore, I think it's the best modern Contra other than Contra 4 on the DS. And I don't think it's outlandish to say that. It's way better than Contra 3.
I agree, and it's oddly like people have a rose-tinted glasses with 3. 3's a great game. I'm not going to take away from it, but
It's really not.
the Genesis one's way better. I think there's a lot of games with Genesis where there's different graphical styles. It tried to do a little more, in quotations, 3D. And if you guys have played Virtua Fighter 2, it's not expensive, but I can't believe it's running on a Genesis. It looks like full 3D fighting game, and it's crazy that it actually has a good frame rate. I know the life cycle of Sega games, especially if you go to like South America and Brazil, they really kept like Master System ran past the Genesis. But there's some of the late Genesis games that were only made in Brazil that look insane on Genesis, where they just kept it moving. Somehow there's things they made run on this platform that had no business running. A couple of games I would like to specifically talk about. Universal Soldier is one that's criminally overlooked. I think people go, it's a movie game, who cares? But it plays like Turrican. It plays exactly like Turrican. It's way cheaper than Super Turrican or Turrican, but it's still extremely fun. It's one that I feel like everyone should at least check out once. Shadowrun on Genesis is incredible. I was fortunate enough to get the game before people kind of were hunting for it. Great strategy game.
Sonic and Knuckles, baby.
Obviously, Sega, we got to talk about Sonic for a moment. If you want to talk about fast gameplay, like what's faster than a blue hedgehog? But specifically, Sonic 4, Sonic and Knuckles. I guess it's not 4. It's
3.
No, 3 came out by
Sonic the Hedgehog 3.
It was the 4th Sonic
It's kind
game.
of just like its own title.
But it had the Sonic and Knuckles, specifically worth mentioning, where it decided to be like its console, and you could stick another game into it and make a gigantic robot. But it's cool. There's box variants and stuff for it. Obviously, Sonic's a hot commodity right now with the movie being very successful. There's great beat 'em ups. Like Brian already mentioned Golden Axe, which is a franchise near and dear to my heart, but Maximum Carnage, Separation Anxiety,
Streets of Rage.
Yeah, the Captain America game on there is fantastic. Like, there's nothing more badass than Vision just standing with his arms crossed, just decking people and putting his arms like folded under immediately. But yeah, it's a console that
Definitely the beat 'em up console.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, variety is the slice of life for the Genesis. So
Shout out to King of the Monsters.
all right, last but not least, this was one that's on Barry's list, and it's one I've recently started kind of acquiring stuff for, so I'm pretty excited to talk about it. Barry, what do you have for us?
DS and 3DS family, not one specifically over the other. And this is kind of the same realm as the PSP, where boomed in the dark ages of RPGs, so a lot of RPG titles are on this that you wouldn't have imagined would be on a console or a handheld that Nintendo puts out. And Nintendo is very interesting with their handhelds. Like, it was very geared towards kids in terms of the company. That's just kind of how they've always been. They've been very, like, young player friendly. But then you've got, like, Spawn on the Game Boy Color. Just, like, weird titles like that. So the DS came out 2004. The big thing about it is it had that backwards compatibility with the Game Boy Advance. So you got a DS and you could still play all your Game Boy Advance games. That really pushed a lot of people to invest into it. So it's like, oh cool, I get to play DS games and all my old Game Boy Advance games on a backlight screen, and it's rechargeable. I don't, like, you know, if you didn't have an SP, then the DS was the way to go. Then they got the DS Lite, which still had it. They phased out the Game Boy Advance on the DSi. And then just like as it kept going, they just kept doing iterations of it. It's like, all right, so you got the OG DS Lite, DSi, DSi XL, 3DS, 3DS XL, new 3DS, then the new 3DS XL, 2DS, and 2DS XL. I think that's all of them.
Talk about variants. That was super impressive that you just started listing all those off.
So like every single version's got a big fat version after the the DSi once they got rid of the Game Boy Advance. But I didn't play these when they came out. I didn't get a DS until way later, until the 3DS XL era. I think what pushed me to get one was Smash, I believe. They put Smash on it. And that's how I broke the analog stick on my 3DS, so it's a nub now. But I love collecting the consoles. Like all the Pokemon, I have all the Pokemon ones, I believe, for those. The Pikachu is my thing. I got the shout out to Nate for being like, hey, here's the Japanese 2DS Pikachu edition. I said, give me that.
It's cute that you thought I was checking to see if you wanted it. I was seeing if you already had it so I could buy it, but I appreciate you.
All right. Well, and the DS is really interesting because like now in terms of Pokemon, that's a lot of people's first start is DS era. And that's where I fell off actually. I was an advanced player, so I fell off because I just, I didn't get one when the new games came out. I didn't get one till way later, but there's so many good titles on that one. There's so many varieties of titles. Everybody had a DS at one point or another. It's one of those handhelds that like feels good to play, especially when they got the bigger versions.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one that we kind of came in late on too. I came on it extremely late. I feel like Brian had dabbled with one a little more than me before.
No, I actually bought mine just on a whim. It was like the new 3DS XL just came out, and I was like, all right, I guess I'll get this. I don't really know what's on here because I was a PSP guy, and I had the Vita. And I looked back at the DS library, and it's kind of like, I missed some freaking gems. Like, there's so many Castlevania games, and there's Metroid exclusive stuff. There's portable Shin Megami Tensei games. So
what's crazy about that is I don't ever feel like people are comparing PSP and DS as competitors because the games are so different.
They're drastically different.
Very different games. So I don't, as a PSP primarily player, I didn't buy a DS because I already had a handheld, but I wasn't sitting there being like, well, PSP games are better, so I'm not buying a DS.
Right.
They just, at the time, that was the style that I was interested in.
I just didn't have I actually got, one of my better jobs when the 3DS XL came out, and I was like, oh, I guess I'll buy one. Smash was like the first game I picked up for it. So
I feel like that's what pushed a lot of people into that console,
right.
Smash, when they did that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Nate.
Good.
Honestly, I was buying more DS games because I realized I missed so many like franchises I love before I was buying 3DS. I have way more DS games than I do 3DS games.
What about you, Nate?
Yeah, it's one I've recently started. It's one I've always had a couple, about 20 plus games for, but like recently, since you've been looking for them and I'm hunting with you, I'm like, well, I should be really aware of this. And like you guys have kind of touched on, very, very deep library. There's ports of Brothers in Arms, just stuff you wouldn't even think. You're like, what is this doing on here? There's Call of Duty, ports I would never expect on a DS. Pokemon, Castlevania is kind of the ones that really was like, I need to start taking this console seriously. So I thankfully got those before they Nuclear Warhead expensive for Soul Silver and Heart Gold now. But yeah, it's another one of those consoles again where Game of Hunting with Barry, Nate, you should probably pick this up. Oh, it says Sega on it. Turns out to be Sands of Time. Pretty expensive game, very cheap. I've kind of built my library up that way, but my wish list for this console is gigantic right now because it's one I was fortunately just not really going for. And a lot of times when I was finding them, it was like cart only, missing a manual, stuff like that. And you'd go to GameStop and it would be behind a case and you have to bug the guy that looks like he doesn't want to even talk to you anyways. Hey, can you go unlock the case so I can see this is a manual? It doesn't have a manual and he hates your guts already.
Yeah.
It's one of the consoles that it's not easy to find what I'm actually looking for on it, but you can find stuff for it pretty consistently. Unfortunately, with it being in a hard case, it's great because it helps you not lose the cart. I feel like with a lot of handhelds, Game Boy specifically, never find the box for it. You'd always find the plastic case if you're lucky, but these, it's like generally you can find a case. It's possible to find complete though, which adds to the fun, like you said with the PSP though. When you do find that clean copy, it's like, yes!
I mean, that's why in handheld screams to me in terms of like that dopamine rush you get when you finally find it is like it's probably same with you guys in cartridge games.
Yeah.
Because they threw away, especially the cardboard. Cardboard's so difficult to collect for because they got trashed. Same deal with handhelds. They got trashed. A lot of people who are really playing these games to play them, they put them in the little carrying cases and threw the cases away. So to find a DS game or a PSP game out there with an original cover and the booklet and everything inside of it, it's just like that rush you get where you're like, yes, finally, it's here. I don't have to dig like a tiny little cartridge bin somewhere. I'm at the point where I'll buy case and manual, no game.
Same.
Because the games are so much easier to find. I picked up Etrian Odyssey 1 and 2 without a game because I know now I have the case and the manual for a good deal. I can just sit and wait until I find the cart somewhere.
There was a point fairly recently where I had more case and manuals than actual games for my DS. So I had the Castlevania games and Metal Slug 7 where I just had the case for it. And I eventually just got the carts. So now I'm like kind of caught up to where I have everything complete. But yeah, it's one of those systems, if you find a case and manual, I'm more prone to like, I'm going to go ahead and buy this because I don't know the next time I'm going to find it with this.
Right.
My horror story for that is Metroid Prime Pinball. Trying to find that damn Rumble pack that slid into the advanced cartridge took me forever just to find one. I mean, I could have found it online, but that's like cheating to me, and I wanted to actually find it out in the wild.
For a DS?
Yeah. Yep. For Metroid Prime Pinball, they had it was like it fit in the Game Boy Advance cartridge slot, and it was basically a Rumble pack.
So it was built for like the early models.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yep.
There is a lot of really cool accessories for the DS and 3DS too. Like I have a Guitar Hero monstrosity.
Oh yeah.
And they're cheap, but it's like, it's up my alley where it's just goofy. It's like you shred with the stylus and then you have this insane attachment for buttons.
The problem with DS also is it is a slippery slope because there are so many special editions that like I think I have 5 or 6 DSs and that's not even all the ones I want. I'm like, damn. I want like the Fire Emblem ones, the Monster Hunter ones, and like anything and anything. Like there's a game they're going to release a version.
A lot of them are like really awesome.
They're awesome.
A lot of, especially modern like special editions, like there's just, they'll have a little scribble. I'm like, look, it's Halo. I'm like, how the hell is this Halo? I feel like the DSs and 3DSs, they like went all out.
Oh yeah,
they're beautiful.
Absolutely. I mean, there are some that are subpar. Like when Fire Emblem Awakening came out, and the special edition for the game was blue and it had the crest on it. It's okay. It's all right.
Even some of the non-game ones, like the Galaxy one, is like really cool. Like there's super cool.
Yeah.
Super Nintendo one's awesome.
Yeah. There's one styled like the Super Nintendo controller, right?
Yeah.
And the Hyrule Shield, and just so many very, very cool special editions.
They really killed it for sure. Like it's awesome.
And that's when 3DS is when it boomed. It boomed hot and fast with those.
I feel like it's one of those consoles that you can set forever on your target and you're never going to find what, because there's so much and it's a good thing. Like it keeps the hunt going. It's kind of like collecting comic books where it's like, I'm never going to complete this run, but I know that, and that's oddly exciting to me where I can still go for that dopamine hit because I'm always going to find something for it.
You'll find something for it once in a blue moon at this point. Do you have any games shout out?
Yeah, there's a couple, and that's what's cool about this library. There's obvious ones. We've touched on Castlevania and Pokemon, but there's an id game called Orcs and Elves where the stylus is actually like a staff. There's just so much gimmicky weird stuff where I'm like, this is awesome. This is so up my alley. Being an Xbox fan, there's Microsoft games on the DS. Mech Assault is on the DS. It's a pretty fun game. It's actually a pretty good little game. Yeah, but even like Age of Empires, there's a DS version. I've found it a couple times. It's not complete, but I'd really like to get that one. But yeah, there's so much variety. So many different game types. I started off by going for just the crazy stuff when I find it. Like, how the hell is Call of Duty Black Ops on here? I'm going to grab this because it's $2.
Well, I remember us being in the store and seeing Fighting Fantasy. Was that a UFO?
Oh, God.
Because I had it, and I was like, the only reason I bought it is because this game looked like
the ridiculousness
absolute
of
shit.
it. Yeah.
And you saw it and was like, oh, like you wanted it for a completely different reason than I did. But we still ended up both picking it up. Like, It's just so fun that it has titles that different kinds of people can still pick up, even though they have very different interests.
Yeah, it's weirdly one of those, you go to Walmart and you see like the old stock, like there's still, everyone probably has a tale of seeing a PS2 game at Walmart, seeing something that just does not belong. There's still 3DS games and DS games at Walmart every once in a while. I was fortunate to snag Dragon Quest 7 on clearance at Walmart. I knew it was a good find, but Barry was with me. He's like, dude, this is a really good find.
I threw that in your hands and said, you had better walk out of here.
I was like,
with
cool,
this.
it's on clearance for $20. Barry's like, you don't understand, boy. It's sealed. Like, grab that, boy. And I was like, okay, it's cool. And then like you get in the car and I'm like, oh God. Like, so I feel like it's one of those fun consoles where it's like you're still going to find games for it. There's a couple that had like amiibos packed in with them. Just super unique. If you're into weird packaging, like some of the Pokemon special editions, like the Amazon ones had like figures in them, and I've been fortunate to find some of those. But
interesting steelbook combos and whatever. Yeah,
whatever you're into collecting, there's something in the DS library that's going to like push your button. Brian, how about you? You have any games you want to give a special shout out to?
Yeah, we've touched on it already, but specifically Castlevania Order of Ecclesia. It's the best handheld Castlevania game.
Those are the DS ones, right?
Yeah,
I hear very
the
good
original
things
DS.
about the DS ones.
Yeah, they're all great. Like Dawn of Sorrow is more of like magic, less whip. So I prefer Order of Ecclesia, and plus there's multiple playable characters. There's a Metroid Prime game for the original DS that's awesome. Metroid Prime Hunters. It is so much better than the 3DS Federation Force. That game's great. It's a first-person shooter that works on a handheld, and the controls, you think like sitting there and moving with the stylus would like obscure your vision, but it works really, really well. As far as for the 3DS, we talked about Smash. Smash runs great on the 3DS. It's a blast. But Metroid Return of Samus Returns, I prefer it over Metroid Dread, I think.
Wow.
I know it's crazy to say, but like the fact that we finally got a real Metroid 2 remake and just playing it for the first time, being like blown away, like finally in nostalgia for it, it's great. Also, shout out to Project X Zone, pretty obscure, unique Bandai game where it's like a strategy grid-based game, but it's got Capcom characters in it, so pretty cool.
Those crossover games?
Yeah, there's 1 and 2. So
another one I picked up on clearance. I think it was at Target or...
Yeah, because you were like, hey, you'd probably like this game.
Yeah.
I remember
it's
that.
up your alley. Yeah, for sure. It's a blast, but no, it's literally someone that my not very good boss brought it into work while we were all working playing it, and I was like, well, break, let me see it. And I was like, dude, this game's awesome. So, and then lastly, they had like the Nintendo mashup, like high score game for Wii, but there's also one on the 3DS Ultimate NES Remix. Just a super fun game to play on the go.
It's like the perfect portable game because it's bite-sized. It's almost like WarioWare-esque where, yeah, you can sit there and get hooked on it for a couple hours and lose track of time or just play it for a couple minutes. I did want to give one more special shout out. Movie tie-in games, they're usually bad. The Thor game on DS is like super high graphics, high gameplay. It's actually a really fun game. It has no business being as good as it is.
I see that one on 360 occasionally.
It's trash on the 360.
Yeah,
is it?
It's God.
Oof.
Also frustrating. One of my more proud 1,000 Gamerscore games. It's frustratingly difficult.
Obviously, Pokemon's a big deal on the DS, but I'm gonna shout out Soul Silver and Heart Gold because this was like the first like remake Pokemon game we got, and that Johto era is my absolute favorite. So when those came out, I just had so much fun playing Soul Silver. A lot of people actually hate those,
which is crazy.
They don't like them, which to each their own, I suppose. But like, I love them. Absolutely love them. Like, I'm not into Diamond and Pearl and Black and White and whatnot, but man, Soul Silver and Heart Gold were so fun to play. The Pokewalker was such an interesting idea that was like, it's almost like a Pokemon Tamagotchi where you put your Pokemon on the Pokewalker and you walk around with it, and then I think you can hatch eggs with it too.
It's like Pokemon Go before Pokemon Go, kind of.
Yeah. And I don't remember how it connected. Was it wireless?
Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure.
Was it?
Yeah.
I think so.
So they're doing very cool things with it, even taking the portability another step. So that was really cool. Ton of Shin Megami games, lots of them, which is very fun to have them on the DS and then see, hey, we remade it and made it better for the 3DS. And I said, do I need both? I don't know. These are hard questions.
Freaking good on the DS though. Like, I'm very casual with the series, but it's literally one of the first things I picked up because I'm like, oh, I've heard good things, and like blown away by how well it plays on the DS.
It's interesting to think that like Shin Megami is almost like a handheld system or a handheld game. That's really what they've really came out on. We had a little bit of it on, PS2, but DS and now Switch. Like, it's almost like a handheld title. Shout out to Dragon Quest, where for a very, very long time, Dragon Quest, that was the only way you could play any of the new ones. So, like, Dragon Quest 4 is actually Dragon Warrior 4 on the Nintendo, but nobody really bought it. And they completely remade it for the DS, so you can play basically the exact same game on there. But then 5 only came out on the DS. That was it. It was lost in Japan for a long time, and then we got it on the DS, and then 6 came out on the DS. Then they remade 7 and 8 on the 3DS, which arguably said that's the way to play 7 because it's trash on the PS1. And then Dragon Quest 9, I think that was on the DS, not 3DS. It's very odd. The order is weird because, like, at that period in time, we already had Dragon Quest 7 and 8. So the next natural one was 9 on the DS, and then they went back and remade 7 and 8.
Wow.
Yeah, so the Dragon Quest lives very, very handedly in with DS. Last one is Fire Emblem Revitalized. Shadow Dragon came out. A lot of people don't like Shadow Dragon. It's actually a remake of the first Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. It's the DS one. It's the first one we got instead of like the Switch one. A lot of people didn't like that game, but it was Awakening, because Awakening brought accessibility to the series where they got rid of permadeath. You could choose if you wanted permadeath, and then the Fire Emblem bonding, you could start putting characters together, and then they'd have kids, and that was a whole part of the story, but it brought, the dating sim life to Fire Emblem, and now that's what people want when they play Fire Emblem, and a lot of people don't like going back and playing the old ones because there is no system like that. And we want what we want, and we want to date the hotties is what we want. So Fire Emblem, honestly, probably would have died if it didn't do so well on the DS, so shout out to the DS for Fire Emblem, because this is, what we get today is bomb.
I think the DS probably has to be accredited with exposing a lot of these franchises to people. Like these people, like DS sold so much. If you count all, like it's an astronomically high number. And Fire Emblem's probably a great example of like probably blew up on people's radar for the first time on DS. And
yes,
there's probably
absolutely
countless franchises where people are like, oh man, found it on DS.
I feel like Contra is one of those as well. Contra kind of got lost a little bit and then brought back.
Contra 4 is so good too. Yeah, it's better than Contra 3, and I think it might be better than Contra Hardcore. But that's something where the dual screen was super interesting, because Contra has always been like layered with different levels, right? But messing with the top screen, the bottom screen, watching the bullet track was super cool.
And it's almost sad though that like the DS was so unique in a way where a lot of those games we can't port and have new versions of in new consoles. Like they've been trying to do it. Like Neo World Ends With You just got a remake or a remaster for the Switch, and a lot of people are just like, this isn't the same. Like we lose the ability to do both screens.
Right, hard to replicate.
A lot of big part of the game's lost. So
it's a good thing they're very easy to tinker with and mod.
Yes. Full disclosure, I fully support emulation.
Same. Preservation's a big deal. But yeah, even emulating the DS games, it's not the same. Like, yeah, you get two screens, but like you lose the touch aspect, and
you don't.
You can click, but sometimes it's just not the same, man.
What do you mean?
They're pretty nice now, man.
The emulation's like nice.
Like on a PC? Oh, playing it through the DS. Like
playing it through the DS.
That makes jailbreaking.
Yeah, we're talking about emulation on the actual DS.
Right, that makes more sense, because I was thinking like I've seen people like stream DS games on their computer. I'm like, this looks ridiculous, just having like the two screens stacked on your desktop. Like,
once you open up the back, you wouldn't even know. And most of them now, like the mod community is fantastic for DS.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
And it needs it. I mean, at this point, like, I'll sit here and tell you all day, go emulate it if you can, because, it's Nintendo's choice to shut down their store, and we have to preserve it somewhere.
I agree.
And the internet's the one that's doing it.
Yep.
So the delightful thing about this hobby is, especially when you're talking about consoles that are important to you, near and dear to your heart, is how personal it is. We'd love to hear your guys' feelings on this topic. Everyone's console's kind of a reflection of themselves and what they go after for collecting, so we'd love to hear you guys and get your engagement on this, whether it be Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, or Twitter. Hit us up on we're at Collecti-Bros Pod. We want to talk a little bit about what's next.
So the next episode for our Is It Worth It series will be Godzilla on the PS4, a franchise near and dear to me. However, I don't think it translates 100% in the games, but you'll have to tune in to find out.
I'm obviously very excited to talk about that one. We hope you guys are eagerly anticipating it. Thank you for checking us out. Collecti-Bros out. I can't believe I'm about to say
Who
this.
and why?
Marry, fuck, kill video game consoles. Brian, go.
Oh, God. Marrying the original Xbox, favorite console to collect for. We go way back. Now, I'm leaning towards one of the modern consoles for banging. Like, I like the idea of banging the old reliable PS4, but roaches, that's gross. I'm gonna go Xbox Series X. I think it's slick, it's tall, it's warm.
All right.
And then kill Virtual Boy, just because it's just, I love the collecting for the console. Doesn't mean I want to be with it forever.
Oh my God.
It's loud, it's clunky.
Barry.
All right, so I'm marrying the PS2. Such a big variety. I got so many date options. All right. Playing it for days, never getting tired.
It's consistent.
Lifelong companion.
Yeah.
Love you.
Someone you can build a life with.
All right, we're fucking the Wii because you wanna get active. You get that Wii. You wanna explore something different. Got them peripherals.
So you get a lot of give and take with
You know what? Maybe you will find some items/toys that you didn't consider beforehand that you now do while fucking the Wii.
Do you remember the commercials that knock on your door and like, we would like to play? Like,
Like, I don't know. I mean, we're killing the 64.
Good choice.
Killing the 64. Dead. DED. All of your games can go die too.
Plus, he wants to blow it every time, right?
okay, I'm marrying the PS1. It was my first love, so we'll do that. I'm gonna fuck the Wii U. It's a little exotic.
You fuck the Wii U?
Yeah.
You fucking the Wii's older brother?
Yeah. It's a little exotic. Touchscreen.
No peripherals though. Well, I mean, like the Wii over here the Wii can get kinky, boy.
Yeah, you
I
get
got a
some
lot of
toys out.
options.
I can take the Wii U, like part of it with me wherever I go.
Well, I think you could take
On
the
a
Wii a little
plane,
easier if you
on
know
a
what I'm saying.
train, in a submarine, wherever.
Okay, so you're taking the Wii U out and about.
It's a gamepad. You gotta show it off.
Well, so you fucking the Wii U out and about.
Yeah, wherever, whenever.
All right.
I can't let put this much thought into my life into this. Then kill Tiger R Zone.
What is that?
Exactly.
What is that?
It's the one you flip over your eye.
Yes, it's like okay, so it's like a headband. The screen is like an island.
Who made that?
Tiger Electronics.
I might as well have said fuck all the solitaire things you got under your bathroom sink while you're shitting.
The what?
The Tiger. Okay, so Brian knows exactly what I'm talking about because he's dying.
The little handhelds.
All the little handhelds, you throw them under your bathroom sink because that's where they go.
Yeah.
Because you only play them when you're pooping.
I almost said a Tiger handheld, but I feel like that would have been like
Mine was solitaire.
even disrespectful for Tiger. So the R Zone's just like it tried too hard to be cool, and if it's like I'm trying to seduce me, it's like, hey man, it's like no, you're just trying too hard. So like you got to go.
That's like that's basically just a scouter.
Yeah, it looks like
Why would you-
Scouter.
Wait, are you fucking it?
No, I'm killing it.
Oh, what's wrong with you? That thing was awesome.
It's one of those things that it's going to talk about how awesome it is while it's doing it, and then you're just like, shut up and get this over with.
Oh,
That's how
all
I view it
right, all
as.
right.
It's probably one of those things that's like, am I doing good? It's like, leave me alone. Get out of my room.
That's what the game's like.
I don't know why I'm being, like, we're talking about having sex with consoles, so I'm getting attacked for going in to kill one. Like, can we talk
You
about that?
didn't.
This is where we're going to get all the heat.
This might be the last episode of Collecti-Bros. If you guys are still with us, like,
This is where the TikTok page blows
The
up.
sickos. This is where we get the sickos.
there's people that sit there and wait just for this part of the episode.
Only to find out it's consoles, and they said, "This is my time to shine."
Like,
Retweets.
Too late.
I got
Retweets
too
their
late.
3 picks.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
They
You
just
guys don't want
add
to fuck
us.
a PS4. Trust me.
Got their Wii at the dinner table.
If you
with a
made it
glass
this
of
far,
wine. It's like,
add us on
date
Twitter
night.
what your picks are, because I want to know.
Yeah, well, maybe.
You don't want to know? I want to know. I want to know who agrees with me to fuck the Wii.
I don't. It's gonna start off funny when someone's got like a glass of wine, like their Wii, like, hey, date night. Like, I just hope it stays that. I don't want to see too many pictures.
Don't want to see a Wiimote with the cigarette dangling out of its mouth.
No,
I don't know. Elon Musk might let it on there now.
it's true. This is over.